Bernie Sanders has been showing up to fight for progressive reform in our politics for his entire career. Bernie shows up when others cannot, and I decided it was my time to do the same. I am sad, I am scared, and I am angry. But most importantly, I am determined to do everything in my power to ensure that Bernie Sanders becomes the next president of the United States. I am here because I could not live with myself if I did not do everything I possibly could to show up. I am here. I am showing up for children sleeping on the border, separated from their parents, in cages. For women who are seeing their rights being stripped away state by state. For thousands of families who will see loved ones die this year because they don't have access to health insurance. Getting a little emotional. For kids who are scared to go to school in fear of a school shooting. For my brother and his wife who will have $300,000 of student loan debt. For my parents who both have severe medical issues and pay large medical bills despite having insurance. And lastly, I am here for Bernie Sanders, who has been fighting for us his entire life on the picket line in Congress and soon in the Oval Office. We cannot do this alone. We need your help. I need your help right here in Sullivan County. If you're like me, when history looks back on this moment, you're going to want to be able to say that you did everything you could to show up when it mattered most. Starting on September 14th, we will be knocking doors right here in Sullivan County. Join us. Between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m., I will be there waiting for you at Dunkin' Donuts. And if you're kind enough to host us in your home, please talk to me after this. Again, starting September 14th, Saturday, we'll be knocking doors from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. And don't show up for the campaign, don't show up for Bernie Sanders, don't show up for me. Show up for your neighbors, show up for your friends, show up for your family, and most importantly, show up for yourselves. And now, I am very pleased to introduce one of our campaign senior advisors and Bernie's son, Levy Sanders.
Wow, this is a huge crowd. First of all, Adrian, thank you so much for what you do. Folks, this is not about Bernie Sanders. This is about each and every one of us. We have to guarantee the Medicare-for-all single-payer healthcare system. That guarantees health care to every man, woman, and child without out-of-pocket expense. That means no co-payments, no deductibles, and no premiums. We need to have a tuition-free public colleges and universities. It is simply outrageous in the wealthiest country in the history of the world that folks are in profound debt, which has significant and profound problems in relation to their whole entire lives. They can be in debt for the rest of their lives. That's simply unacceptable. We need to have paid equity for women. We are in 2019, and women on average make 79 cents to the dollar. It is imperative that women get the whole damn dollar. We need to have paid family and medical leave. Again, it is obscene that we do not have this in this state. That needs to change. We need to pressure the legislature as well as the governor and make this happen. We need to have a $15 minimum wage. As everyone knows, right now in the state of New Hampshire, it is $7.25. That is simply unacceptable. We need to have debt-free college. Now, I could on and on to talk about what Bernie Sanders means to this great country of ours, but it's time to let the man speak for himself. Please give a warm welcome to Bernard Sanders, the next President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Levy. And let me thank Mary Gatchell and Andrew Petro as well for their remarks and music. And it looks like we're going to have to knock down the wall to get anybody more in here. And where's my brother? Larry here? Where is he? All right, so we got the whole family of my brother Larry. Where's Janet here as well? There she is, my sister-in-law. All the way from Oxford, England. So, Levy gave my speech. I'm going home. So what do I do? All right, let me just say this. This is Labor Day, and let me thank all of the working people in New Hampshire and Vermont and all over this country for keeping our great country going. But I think when we think about Labor Day, we think about what's going on for working people in this country. And in that sense, we got a lot of work to do to improve lives for a lot of people. Because what we are experiencing today is that half of our people in the wealthiest country in the history of the world are living paycheck to paycheck. Do you all know what that means? Okay, Larry and I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. And what that means, again, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, is that people, by the millions, are scared to death that if their car breaks down, you know, if you got a lot of money and your car breaks down, it's not a problem. You go use the other car or the third car, and you take the car to the mechanic and you say, fix it. But if you don't have a lot of money and the mechanic tells you it's $500 to fix that car, what happens if you don't have that $500? And there are millions of families who do not have that $500. And if you don't have that $500, you don't get to work. And if you don't get to work, you get fired. If you get fired, you don't have an income, you don't have an income, you don't take care of your kids. And all over this country, people are living under that anxiety. People are worried that if they get sick or somebody ends up in the hospital, their entire financial situation is going to be ruined. You got moms out there and dads who are wondering how they're going to find decent child care that they can afford for their kids. You're finding many hundreds of thousands of bright young kids today who are graduating high school, and you know what? They're deciding that they cannot go to college because they don't have the money to pay. And then increasingly in recent years, what we're finding is young people who are saying, you know what, I'm not going to go to college. You know why? Because I don't want to get out of college with $50,000 in debt and spend the rest of my life paying off of that debt. And you got 45 million people today who are dealing with student debt in America. And in New Hampshire and Vermont, you got all kinds of people, because Levy told you correctly, minimum wage here is $7.25 an hour. How in God's name does anybody live on $7.25 or $8 or $9 or $10 an hour? Can't be done. So meanwhile, while you have a working class that is struggling, we have a massive and grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. The media doesn't talk about it. The Congress doesn't talk about it. But we have got to talk about it. We have got to determine what is important and where the outrage is. To me, it is not acceptable. And I will talk about it and talk about it. And as president, do something about. We don't need other people to tell us our reality. All right, that's the important point. And here is the reality. 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Top 0.1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. In this city and all over Vermont, you got people working 2 or 3 jobs. 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. Over the last 30 years, listen to this, you're not going to see this on TV. Over the last 30 years, according to the Federal Reserve, the top 1% has seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth. The bottom half of Americans have seen a $900 billion decline in their wealth. Now, you know why people are angry? Today, in real inflation accounted for wages, the average American worker is making exactly what he or she did 45 years ago. You got it? Despite all of the new technology out there, all of the increase in worker productivity, average American worker has gone absolutely nowhere, and almost all new income and wealth has gone to the top 1%. So on this Labor Day, let me tell you what this campaign is about, is creating a government and an economy that works for all people, not just the 1%. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We should not be having tonight over 500,000 Americans who are homeless. We should not be a nation in which many millions of people are paying 40, 50, 60% of their limited income for housing. We should not be a nation in which bright young people are leaving the teaching profession because they can't make a living doing some of the most important work in America. This campaign is about, for me, a number of things. Number one, obviously, it is very important for us that we win here in New Hampshire. Last time we did really well, and with your help, I am absolutely confident that we're going to win in New Hampshire again. I feel really good as we go around the state, and we've been doing events all over the state, feeling really, really good about the turnouts that we're seeing and the support that we have. And obviously what this campaign is about is winning the Democratic nomination. And what this campaign is all about is defeating the most dangerous president in the modern history of the United States. Now, you know, all of us have conservative friends, and I have many. And I respect them, and I like them. We disagree, and that's called American democracy. But we must not continue to have a president who is a racist, who is a sexist, who is a homophobe, who is a xenophobe, and who is a religious bigot. All right, we can have... And we cannot continue to have a president who thinks that he's going to get reelected by dividing us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our sexual orientation. That cannot happen. And what our campaign is about is exactly the opposite. Trump wants to divide us up. We are bringing people all over this country together, black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American. We're bringing people who are born in America, people who have immigrated to America, gay, straight. We are bringing our people together around an agenda that works for everybody and not just wealthy campaign contributors. That's why we win this election. And I'm really proud, very proud of the kind of grassroots support that we are showing. We have well over 1 million people, and many here in New Hampshire, who have volunteered to help out on the campaign. I think we have broken the world's record for the number of individual contributions that we have received. I think there's no campaign in history at this point that has received more contributions. They are very modest contributions. But I'd rather, we have gotten so much support from teachers, from workers at Walmart, from workers at Amazon. And that is what this campaign is about. It's a campaign of the working class and for the working class, and a campaign that intends, as president, to take on the greed and corruption of the corporate elite. Now, I want you to think about what makes our campaign different than any other. Is I am the only candidate, probably ever, who will tell you a simple truth, and that is no president, not the most honest or well-intentioned, can do it alone. All right? Can't do it alone. Why is that? Why is it that despite the good intentions of people for so many years, the average worker today is no better off than he or she was 45 years ago? Why is it that we have such a massive level of income and wealth inequality? Why are we the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? Why do we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Why do 45 million people leave school deeply in debt? Why? And the answer is that a significant part of the power in this country doesn't rest with the Congress, doesn't rest with the president. It rests with a corporate elite whose greed and corruption has worked for the last 45 years against the best interest of working families in this country. All right? That's the reality. It's not a reality you're going to see on television. It is not. You're not going to see it in the newspapers. But here is the truth. The truth is that the only way we bring about the change that you want, that the majority of the American people want, is when millions of people come together, stand up, and tell this corporate elite that our great country belongs to all of us and not just a handful of billionaires. That's what... So that's what this campaign is about. And what that means, and I got to be honest with you, this is tough stuff. I could give you a long speech. And I can tell you all the wonderful things I want to do, and I'm being sincere in telling you that. But they will not happen unless we have a political revolution where millions of people stand up and fight back. Because all of you know that the history of real change in America always takes place from the bottom on up, never from the top on down. That's the history of change. Nobody gave working people a permission to form a union. They fought for the right to join unions and engage in collective bargaining. Nobody gave women the right to vote. It was millions of women who demanded the right to vote 100 years ago. And women who struggled then and are struggling now for the right to control their own bodies. Nobody gave African Americans what they have today. They had to stand up and fight and take on racism from one end of this country to the other. And nobody gave our gay brothers and sisters the right to marry. They had to fight for it. And that is what we're talking about today. Again, you're not going to see this in the media. I'm the only candidate who will tell you that. And that is, right now, you are living in a country which is increasingly becoming an oligarchy, where the political system is corrupt because you got billionaires who buy elections. Mitch McConnell does not work for the people of Kentucky. He works for the billionaires who pay his salary. And it's not just Mitch McConnell. It is not just Mitch McConnell. That's widespread. It's in Congress. It's all over, state by state by state. So what a political revolution is about is having the courage, and let me be 100% honest with you. This is tough stuff. I know these guys. I'm a United States Senator. You know? I know Wall Street, and I know what their power is. And I know that after we bailed them out against my vote, I didn't vote for it, 11 years ago, you know what they're doing now? They're charging you 20, 25% interest rates on your credit card. That's what they're doing. And the 3 out of 4 largest banks in America today are bigger than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. And because of their power under Trump, they even became, some of the other banks became more deregulated. That is the power of Wall Street. You got 6 banks that have assets of over $10 trillion. You got that? They will determine, and they will determine whether companies stay in the United States or go abroad to cheap labor countries. They determine what interest rates you pay. But it's not just the power of Wall Street, which is extraordinary. It is the power of the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm just not talking about greed here. I'm talking about greed and corruption. All right? Last month, I took a trip to Canada with some folks in the Midwest. And these were diabetics who use insulin to stay alive. We went from Detroit, Michigan to Windsor, Ontario. It was about a 15-minute trip. People were able to buy insulin that they desperately needed for 1/10 of the price that they were paying in the United States. Got that? 10%. Do you all know that we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Do you all know that 1 out of 5 Americans who go to the doctor cannot afford to fill the prescription that their doctor writes? Think about how insane that is. You go to the doctor because you're sick. Doctor makes a diagnosis, writes out a prescription, and you can't afford to fill it, and you get even sicker. That's the bad news. Good news is, for the drug companies, they made $69 billion in profit last year. For their CEOs, they got millions of dollars. All right? So what we have to appreciate is there are people in these drug companies who collude. Right now, as you know, there's a massive lawsuit being engaged, and I know this state of New Hampshire, as much as any state in this country, has suffered from the opioid crisis. And you're all following what's going on in the lawsuits right now, where states' attorney generals are arguing, I think quite correctly, that the manufacturers of these opioids knew that they were addictive. They knew it, and yet they continued to sell that product while people became addicted to that drug. And it's not just that. There's collusion in insulin manufacturing. You got 3 companies who make 90% of the insulin in this country. Just coincidentally, their prices continue to rise at the same time from each company. So what you got is not only greed, you got collusion. And you got the insurance industry, who will spend hundreds of millions of dollars on TV ads right here in Vermont, in New Hampshire, and all over this country, fighting against Medicare-for-all because they love the current system in which they make billions in profit. And then you got the fossil fuel industry. And I want you, what this campaign is about is asking people to look at the world differently than we do in Congress and that the media does. Take a step back. I will talk about climate change in a moment. But before we even talk about climate change, think about an industry which most certainly understood that the product that they are producing, which is carbon, is destroying this planet. And they continue to do it. And they put money into phony organizations designed to obfuscate the issue and confuse the American people. Oh, we don't know whether climate change is caused by human activity, says the groups funded by the fossil fuel industry. So you got an industry that receives hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks and subsidies from the taxpayers of this country while they destroy the planet. How do you define that? What do we say about that? Is it greed? It's more than greed. I mean, it's a psychiatric problem when you have people, and I mean this, I mean, it really is. They got kids. These CEOs have children. They got grandchildren. They are destroying the planet for their short-term profits. So you got drug companies who are charging people prices they can't afford. People are dying. You got an insurance industry that costs us, we spend twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other country. You got a prison industrial complex. You got a military industrial complex. This is the world that we live in. And what this campaign is about and what our presidency will be about is taking these folks on in a way that no president in modern history has ever done. So I'm here tonight, when I'm here in Claremont, to ask of you is obviously for your support to help me win in New Hampshire, to help me win the Democratic nomination. But I will be back to ask for your help the day after we are inaugurated, because we have got to stand together against the greed and corruption of the corporate elite. And we have to create an economy, and we can do it. And I'll talk about how we can do it, which works for all of us. So what are some of the ingredients? When we talk about creating an economy different than the economy we have right now, what are we talking about? For a start, Trump and his friends gave well over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large profitable corporations. Right now, anybody here know how much Amazon paid in taxes last year? You're right. Made over $10 billion, company owned by the wealthiest guy in America, did not pay 5 cents in federal income tax. How absurd. And Amazon is not alone. You got many of these companies. So they either pay nothing or they paid very little. Some of them got rebates from the IRS. All right, so we got news for them that under a Bernie Sanders administration, they are going to start paying their fair share of taxes. We're going to end this movement toward oligarchy in America. Number two, when we talk about the needs of working families, it is not a radical idea to say that if you work 40 hours a week, you should not live in poverty. When I was here campaigning in New Hampshire 4 years ago, and I talked about raising that minimum wage to $15 an hour, it was considered to be a radical idea. Ain't so radical today, because working people have said, yeah, that's right. We need at least $15 an hour to live with a shred of dignity. And since I was campaigning here in New Hampshire 4 years ago, 7 states have passed the $15 an hour minimum wage. U.S. House of Representatives have passed a $15 an hour minimum wage, and I'm going to do everything that I can to get Mitch McConnell to put my legislation, $15 an hour, on the floor of the Senate. If he does that, we'll pass it there. Four years ago, I came to New Hampshire, said something which I was told was radical and extreme, and that is that every kid in this country, regardless of income, has a right to get a higher education, either a college education or a technical school, in order to fulfill his or her dreams. And I said that we must make public colleges and universities and technical schools tuition free. Well, 4 years ago, that was a radical idea. Ain't so radical now. You got states like California, New York, Tennessee, other communities are moving in exactly that direction. 4 years ago, I said there was something a little bit absurd that we tell our young people, go out and get a college education, and they do that, and then they end up $50,000, $70,000 in debt. And right now, what my view is, at a time when, for the first time in the modern history of this country, our younger generation will likely have a lower standard of living than we do, unless we turn it around. I believe the time is now that if we could bail out the crooks on Wall Street 11 years ago, if we can give $1 trillion+ in tax breaks to the 1%, you know what we could do? We could cancel all student debt in this country. And how we're going to pay for that. I'll tell you how we're going to pay for it. And this is, again, what this campaign is about. It is begging you to think big, not small. For so many years, what we have heard from the corporate elite and their representatives is, look, we need austerity. We're going to have to cut back on education. We're going to have to cut back on healthcare. We're going to have to cut back on infrastructure. Cut for benefits that working people need, and yet it's okay to bail out Wall Street and give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1% and large profitable corporations. We have got to turn that around. What we have got to say is no more austerity for working families who are already struggling. We're going to bring some austerity to the 1%. So people ask me, they say, Bernie, how are you going to pay for making public colleges and universities tuition-free and canceling all student debt? That's an expensive proposition. It is true. It is. That is a proposition that will cost $2.2 trillion over 10 years. We pay for that by putting a modest tax on Wall Street speculation. That raises... So we have got to get out of the habit, that Washington and the media have imposed on us, that it is okay to cut programs for the homeless, for the children, for the elderly, for the veterans, for the sick. That's okay. Well, it ain't okay. It's time that the wealthy and large corporations who are doing better today than they have ever done, that they start paying their fair share of taxes. There's another issue where we are making some progress, but we got a long way to go. 4 years ago when I came to New Hampshire, I said, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, the United States of America should do what every other major country on earth does, and that is guarantee health care to all people as a human right. Through a Medicare-for-all single-payer program. And once again, I was attacked for being unrealistic. This is not what the American people want. People love their insurance companies. Oh, my God. And they love paying premiums. Oh, they hate taxes. They just love, hey, dear, premium time. Let's go out for dinner. Hey, let's go. It's a great day. We're paying our premiums. And we were told that Medicare for all would not be popular. Well, check out all of the polling that has been done recently. A majority of Americans and the overwhelming majority of Democrats believe in Medicare for all. But we got a little problem in front of us, just a teeny bit. It appears that the healthcare industry is not enthusiastic about this idea. I myself don't know why. Well, it may have something to do that at a time when 87 million Americans have either no health insurance or are underinsured, at a time when 30,000 Americans a year die because they don't get to a doctor when they should, at a time when 500,000 people go bankrupt because of their medical bills. In the midst of all of that, at a time when we spend twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other country, well, it just turns out that the healthcare industry last year made over $100 billion in profits. And that's what this whole debate is about. Nobody can defend the dysfunctionality of the current system. It is such an absurd, wasteful, bureaucratic system. No one can really defend it. So what we have is a war going on in this country about whether or not we are going to take on an industry that made $100 billion in profits last year that will spend hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, mark my words, I don't know if it's happened already. It's in Iowa. They're going to be on your TV screen. You're going to turn on the television. Medicare-for-all is terrible. It's awful. It's horrible. It's going to do this to you and that to you. And we hate it. It's awful. And Bernie Sanders is terrible, terrible, terrible. Paid for by the drug companies and the insurance companies. But that won't be so clear. They'll have some phony name attached to it as well. But that's who's paying for these ads. Okay? They think it's a great idea that they make $100 billion in profit while so many people are uninsured or underinsured. I want to talk about the dysfunctionality of the system right now. And that is one of the great lies that takes place is we say, well, somebody has no health insurance. We know how many, it's about 43 million people. But we say that if you have bad insurance, you're insured. So we have people who are underinsured. They have insurance, but that insurance ain't worth nothing because they can't use it when they need to use it. All right? All right. Tell me, just out of curiosity here in Claremont, what are the deductibles that some of you have? Who wants to tell? 3,000, 5,000, what else? How much? How much? There it is, $10,000. All right. You got insurance and you got $10,000. Do you happen to know what you're paying premium every month? It's 66. Only 66 a month. Okay. But you got a $10,000 deductible, which means that every time you go to the doctor, you're going to have to pay out of your own pocket until you run $10,000. That's right, exactly. And that is true for many, many people. So let me tell you what Medicare-for-all means, because there's a lot of debate about it, some honest debate, some not honest debate. So let me be very clear about the bill. I did write the damn bill, sorry. And this is not a radical, I want you to understand, this is not a radical idea. It exists very much, we do better than our Canadian friends, but what I'm talking about is already in existence in Canada. Just out of curiosity, anybody know that if you end up in the hospital in Canada, say with a heart transplant, how much does it cost you in your bill? Anyone know? That's right. All right. Good, you knew that. All right. All right. So this is what our legislation does. It does away with all of the premiums that you're paying and your employer is paying. It does away with all of the co-payments that you are paying when you go to a doctor's office. It does away with all deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses. In other words, like our Canadian neighbors, you'll be able to go to any doctor that you want. They will lie about that, but you can go to any doctor that you want, any hospital that you want, any clinic that you want, and you do not take out your wallet. Okay? Number two, what it does also not only give you freedom of choice, but what we are also going to do is expand Medicare. Medicare is a strong program, but it is far from perfect. And what we will do is expand Medicare to cover hearing aids, to cover dental care, and to cover eyeglasses. So, I mean, when we speak about the dysfunctionality of a system, how do you have, here's Medicare, the most popular health insurance program in America, and yet even that program does not provide dental care for elderly people, which is why you're going to see some elderly people walking around without any teeth in their mouth, or unable to hear because they can't afford the hearing aid. How crazy is that? Either we believe in comprehensive health care, and every time I do a meeting, somebody asks me, well, I have this unusual disease. Is it going to cover me? Of course it will. We're talking about comprehensive health care, a better program than anybody in this room has right now. And we're also talking about lowering prescription drug costs, because we are going to have the reason that we pay 10 times more for insulin than the Canadians do is they negotiate prices with their drug companies. And Medicare today does not. The VA does, Medicare does not. We are going to sit down with the drug companies and tell them, guess what? This is what we are paying. We are going to average out what other countries around the world are paying, and we're not going to pay any more than that. And when we do that and lower drug costs in this country, we will be able, through Medicare-for-all, to make sure that nobody in this country pays more than $200 a year for the prescription drugs they need. And the pharmaceutical industry will not be making $69 billion under a Bernie Sanders administration in profit. And we do something else. Not only do we expand Medicare to cover hearing aids and dental care and eyeglasses, we also expand it to cover home health care. And this is not only the right thing to do, it is a cost-effective thing to do. You know, the stupidity of the current system is that if people do not have a doctor today, they end up in the emergency room. Well, it turns out that the emergency room is the most expensive form of primary health care. You waste money because we don't have doctors for people. Same thing with home health care. You got many people with disabilities or who are getting old who would rather stay home and have somebody come and help them in the house, make the beds, do some cooking, clean the house, or whatever it may be. They'd rather stay home than go to a nursing home, which is far more expensive for the system. I mean, this system is so dysfunctional. I'll tell you, there was a piece in the Washington Post yesterday about one of the police officers who put his life on the line to defend people just the other day in Odessa, Texas. And according to the Washington Post, a family member of that police officer who was wounded trying to save lives has now put a GoFundMe thing up on the internet. How insane is that? Police officer puts his life on the line. Okay. I don't have to tell you that there are people now who are deathly ill or have an accident. Ambulance comes and they say, you can't take me to the emergency room. I can't afford, right? We know people with that experience. So we have a system which is absolutely dysfunctional and irrational. And we're going to change it in the following ways. Not complicated. I get criticized, oh, Bernie wants to disrupt American healthcare system. Not at all. What we're talking about right now is, you all know that if you're 65, you're eligible for Medicare. First year, we lowered the eligibility age from 65 down to 55. Next year, down to 45. Next year, down to 35. And in the fourth year, everybody is covered by Medicare in this country. That's about it. What is complicated, all these other ideas out, you got to fill out your income is this, you can get that, you can't get this, you know, and all that stuff. Let's have a simple system. Let's end this incredible waste and bureaucracy. And it's not just that this system provides $100 billion in profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies. What it also is, it has to administer hundreds of different insurance programs, which means the administrative cost. Anybody here ever argue with an insurance company about whether you are covered or not? You spend half your life doing that. Well, not only do you waste your time arguing, there's somebody at the other end who's paid to tell you that you're not covered when you thought you were covered. So you're spending more to have people tell you that you can't get the medical care that you thought you paid for. All right? So we're going to have a simple system. We cut administrative costs by at least $500 billion a year. And that is why we will be able to cover every man, woman, and child in this country for less per person than they're currently spending. Is healthcare free? Of course it's not. It has to be paid for. It will be paid for in the same way it is paid in every other major country on earth, through the general tax base in a progressive way, which means when you don't pay any premiums and you don't pay any co-payments and you don't pay a nickel out of your own pocket, at the end of the day, the vast majority of the American people will save money. They're going to pay more in taxes, but they ain't going to have to pay all the rest. Overwhelming majority of the American people will save money on their health care cost. End of discussion. So my final word on that is, remember, when the ugly ads come on television about telling you how great the current system is and how hard the insurance companies and the drug companies are working for your behalf, they just love you. Let them continue to do what they're doing. Understand who is paying for those ads. The folks who are paying for those ads made $100 billion in profit last year, and they could care less whether you can afford to go to the doctor or whether you go bankrupt because of your medical bills. So the time is very long overdue that we stood up to these people and moved toward Medicare-for-all, and that is exactly what I intend to do as president. Now, we have a president, okay. We have a president, with whom I disagree on, virtually every issue. But there's one area where not only is he wrong, he is dangerously dangerous. Well, on this one, he is dangerously wrong. And that is, he thinks that climate change is a hoax. Well, I think Donald Trump is a hoax. And the issue here is not what I think, it's what the people who study the issue the most, that is the scientific community. And the debate is over. Scientists from all over the world have concluded virtually unanimously, climate change is of course real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change is already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. And what is most frightening is the scientists have told us that they actually underestimated the severity of the crisis. And what they are now saying is that we have fewer than 12 years to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, or else the damage done in our country and around the world will be irreparable, cannot be repaired. That's where we are. I am proud to tell you that I have introduced the most comprehensive climate change program in the history of the United States of America. I am told by my opponents that my plan is very expensive. And you know what? It is very expensive. But I ask them, what is the alternative? Now, it seems to me you got three approaches to climate change. Number one, you could take the approach of Donald Trump and his Republican colleagues who do not believe in the reality of climate change. That's one approach. And if you take that approach, I worry very much about the future of this planet. The second approach you could take is the moderates who say, well, you're right, climate change is real and I'm really worried about it, but we can't overreact. We have to take a more tepid approach, a modest approach to address it because, to do what you want, Bernie, is really expensive. Well, that is just an inadequate response because what you are dealing with here is the future of the planet. Either the scientists are right or they're not right. And if they are right, our only response must be to act boldly and aggressively. And that means moving, and that our plan is up there on our website, and I won't go through it all now, but it means moving in as short a period as possible away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies like wind, solar, and geothermal and other sustainable energies. It also understands, and this is where it gets really hard, got to be honest with you. It's hard enough to transform our own energy system, but climate change is not just an American issue. This is, by definition, a global issue. And what we need now is not a president who denies the reality of climate change. You need a president, and I hope to be that president, who will lead the world in transforming our energy system. You know, and I may be dreaming here a little bit, I may be, but I would hope that countries all over the world understand that it makes no sense at all to continue spending $1.5 trillion every year on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other. That maybe in this moment of global crisis, maybe, the countries of the world will come together and say, instead of spending $1.5 trillion to kill each other, maybe we combine our resources and we combat our common enemy, which is climate change. All of us continue to be shocked and disgusted and numbed by the gun violence that we see. Whether it was in El Paso last month, Dayton, more recently in Odessa, Texas, we turn on the television and we ask ourselves, what is going on? How could this happen? And be very frank with you, I don't like talking about this issue because it brings up such horrific images that, you know, that terrifies the children, terrifies all of us, but especially the children. The truth is that I was in Iowa last month. This guy gets up, must have been a football player, about 6'2", big guy. And he said, I got to tell you, Senator, that the kids in my school, they're now scared to go to school. And all over this country, including New Hampshire, including Vermont, kids now have drills. You know what this means to kids? Drills in order to, you know, to save them in the event of some terrible tragedy. What we have got to do is everything humanly possible to put an end to these senseless slaughters. And the good news on this issue is that by and large, the American people are fairly united in knowing what has to happen, whether they are from rural states like New Hampshire or Vermont, whether they're from urban areas like New York City or Los Angeles, whether they are gun owners or non-gun owners. People know we must be aggressive in passing common sense gun safety legislation. So this is not a radical idea. Over 90% of the American people believe that we need to expand background checks so that somebody who has a history of violence should not be owning a gun which could hurt himself, herself, or other people. That's what 90% of the American people want. Majority of the American people understand we should do away with the gun show loophole, which allows people legally to buy guns without going through a background check. People want to end the so-called straw man provision, which allows people today legally to go into a gun store, get their background check, buy guns, and then sell those guns to criminal elements. And interestingly, given the horrors that we've seen over the last year, it now appears that a majority and growing number of Americans want to do something that I have supported for many decades, and that is ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. So you might ask if the American people want that to happen, why isn't it happening? And the answer is, I think all of you know, it is the power of the NRA to intimidate Donald Trump and the Republican leadership. So let me be very clear. As President of the United States, The NRA will not intimidate me. Let me say another issue that is, I think, on many people's minds, women and men. And that is, we hear from our my right-wing colleagues in the Congress, and they talk about how they hate big government. They want to get the government off the backs of the American people. Let the American people do whatever they want to do. Let's deregulate this. Let's give freedom to the American people, except when it comes to the right of a woman to control her own body. I happen to believe that a woman's right to control her own body is, in fact, a constitutional right. And the promise that I make to you this evening is that I will never appoint a nominee to the Supreme Court who is not 100% in favor of Roe v. Wade. There are a lot of other issues out there, criminal justice reform, immigration reform, many other issues out there. How we make sure that we expand Social Security and not cut it. But I want to just conclude in this note. This is an unprecedented moment in American history. That's what it is. We're here. We worry about the movement in this country and in many other countries around the world, away from democracy into authoritarian type government. We have a president in this country who does not respect the Constitution, does not respect the separation of powers, has contempt for the media because they expose them every day for the liar that he is. All right? And that is just some of the issues. We have the climate change issue, which is threatening our very planet. We have the economic issues about whether we save the middle class. We have the health care issue about whether we prevent 30,000 people a year dying unnecessarily and forcing working people to pay a lot more for health care than they can afford. And on it goes. We've got a ton of issues out there. And at this moment, I know when people turn on the television, they say, oh my God, got this, and there's another tweet from Trump, and we got all that. How are we going to deal with all this? And all that I'm begging of you now is that not only for yourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren, this is not a time in history that we can afford to live in despair. We cannot afford to become depressed and say, I'm sick and tired of all this. I'm going to stick my head in the closet. I'm not coming out. We cannot afford to do that because the stakes are much too high. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. If we are able to stand up to Trump, who is trying to divide us up by the color of our skin or where we were born or our sexual orientation or our religion, if we can bring our people together, black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, immigrant, native born, if we can do all of that around a progressive agenda, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Nelson Mandela said something, and I'm paraphrasing him a little bit, but it was a brilliant remark. And he said, everything is impossible until it is done. All right? Everything is impossible until it is done. Or we cannot have a Medicare-for-all system like the rest of the world until it is done. We cannot address the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality until we do it. We cannot end the disgrace of having 500,000 people sleeping out on the streets until we do it. We cannot make higher education, public colleges and universities, tuition-free until we do it. We cannot lead the world, and think about what this means. Leading the world and creating millions and millions of jobs all over the world, transforming our energy system. We can't do it until we do it. All right? So, what the establishment, whether it is Congress and the political leaders, whether it is the media, they always want us to think small. Essentially, what they're telling you is, oh, you think you can have health care as a human right. Don't be ridiculous. It can't be done. You think you can go to college tuition free. Don't be ridiculous. Nothing that I have said tonight does not exist in one form or another in other countries around the world. I'm not talking pie in the sky here. You know, Levy mentioned parental leave. You know what? In Norway, when you have a baby, anybody know what kind of leave you get? Anybody know? A year off at full pay. That's what you get. And not just in Norway. Paid vacations. There are millions of workers in this country who have almost no paid vacations at all. It's always delightful to know that when you go to McDonald's, there are people there who are sick because they have to get to work. I'm joking. It's not a good thing. All right. But, other countries do these things. We can do it as well. But we don't do it and will not do it unless we get together, unless we end the divisiveness in this country, and unless we have the courage. And this is not easy stuff. I know I make people nervous. I really do. When I talk about, and these are people who like me. Forget the people who don't like me. All right. And I'm asking you to do something hard. It is hard. I'm asking you to help me take on Wall Street. These guys have incredible power. They own the media. All right? You're going to see all kinds of horrible stories out there every day. Okay? I'm asking you to take on the insurance companies and the drug companies and the greed and the destructiveness of the fossil fuel industry and the prison industrial complex. Imagine having a system where people make money by locking up people or detention centers, okay? Or the military industrial complex. We spend now more money on defense than the next 10 nations combined, okay? No one talks about it. It's okay. Well, I talk about it. So I'm asking a lot of you. I'm asking you to help me win in New Hampshire. I'm asking you to help me win the Democratic nomination. But most significantly, I'm asking you to work with me to transform this country, to make the great United States of America all that you and I know we can become. Thank you all very much.
If anyone wants a picture, we're going to start our line over on this side. I'm going to be the first person in line, so line up behind me. Thank you.